just be patient. This is the first time I've done this interview or this webinar. We're walking through AI-enabled MSP marketing featuring the PRESTO framework. So setting the stage kind of real quick here. My name is Hunter Nelson, president of the company. Got my IT degree at Florida State in 2009, MBA from there in 2017. Spent 10 years in the tech industry, half of that kind of configuring marketing software products, half of that is full stack .NET dev, and have been operating TNHS here for about 7 years. I'm the lead strategist and kind of primary contributor, but we are supported by a staffing company with, we have 3 contractors on staff right now. Who we serve, B2B tech organizations, MSPs, other IT, cybersecurity, SaaS, software devs, value-added resellers, but MSPs are the primary segment, and that's what we do 80% of our business with. Target ICP is in the kind of 1 to 3 million ARR range, with aims of growing towards that 10 million annual revenue mark. That said, we've worked with MSPs as in the sub 500K range all the way up to the 12 million range. So we've done work with kind of various businesses. Our customers do usually have sales staff in place, and then sometimes in-house marketers, and occasionally founder-led sales, but usually there is at least one salesperson on staff. Some added context here, with heavy focus on search engines with the marketing that we do. What we do is Google Ad search campaigns, and kind of content marketing. Focus on this channel because it's typically the highest volume inbound marketing channel for technology businesses. It's one of the best ways to kind of nail the timing element of right message, right time, right place. And a lot of our customers are already going to have memberships to either things like MSP Camp, Paul Green's MSP Marketing, or they'll have an in-house marketer managing kind of social media, webinars and things like that, but they might not have somebody who's like web dev savvy or SEO savvy or pay-per-click savvy. So, we're usually kind of handling that part of the fence. Search engines are a very problem solution focused channel. People turn to search engines often when they have problems. So the dynamics are a lot different than if you're reaching out to somebody via cold channels, direct mail, trying to reach them on social media, things like that. It's a very problem solution focused channel. Just some other kind of important context. MSPs and IT companies are relatively low spending verticals marketing wise. And we're typically forced by necessity primarily into using offshore individual contributors. And a lot of times these ICs have little to no IT experience. I have some SaaS experience or technology experience in general, but usually not MSP or IT stuff. They're generally smart people, so they can kind of catch up. So how do we kind of put the guardrails and systems in place to help them and our businesses succeed? And if you're doing a lot of marketing, creating a lot of content, you will inevitably kind of run into writer's block. So a lot of these, growth challenges and the search engine focus and the, it being a problem solution focused channel are kind of how we got around to building this, PRESTO framework. So kind of introducing the PRESTO framework here. It stands for Pain, Resonate, Educate, Simplify, Testify, Offer. And it was inspired in some form by some established copywriting frameworks. Two kind of well-known ones are Pain, Agitate, Solve, and Awareness, Interest, Desire, Action, AIDA. But I found that these and a lot of kind of marketing frameworks are really consumer focused. The US economy is 70% consumer spending. So a lot of marketing philosophy is based on doing e-commerce marketing and consumer marketing. So the PRESTO framework was designed specifically for B2B lead generation because it's not as visual of a field, it's not as impulse driven. People don't necessarily see like, oh hey, I liked that hat on social media, so I'm gonna click to a landing page and buy it within 20 minutes. A much more rational, consideration-driven kind of process. So kind of diving through the Presto elements here. The first one is pain. Again, kind of, circling back to that context of the search engine focus and search engines being a very problem solution, focused channel. People turn to search engines when they're experiencing a moment of specific purpose. So, we have really found over the years that it's hard to sell people on potential or hope or risk taking or things like that. And people generally buy, at least in B2B, off of specific pain points or specific problems that they need solving. That they may want to do more. People are very well-meaning, but like in terms of actually getting people to move forward, it's generally off of like something that's causing them some pain or problem. And the better you understand people's pain and the reasons they're kind of, buying and what's creating that pain, the better chance you have of generating leads and attracting attention. Also kind of think of the P as purpose, or purpose, kind of interchangeable, and the main function of that as a hook to kind of, grab attention. We want to let them know that we understand their pain ASAP. Next kind of element is resonate. Once we've established that we understand their pain, we've kind of hooked them, we've got their attention. We want to continue to kind of build some rapport. Resonate and rapport are kind of interchangeable. We also need to like establish the relationship building element and warm up the reader a little bit before starting to try and kind of sell to them. So in our content marketing, our landing pages we build, social media posts and things we build, we start off with those pain elements, kind of establish that we understand their need, and then we kind of warm them up a little bit with resonating copy or elements. We transition into kind of educate. Educate is where kind of the meat and potatoes of most content. It's also the most flexible element. And, one of the main goals is to kind of answer readers' questions. And fundamental question types are who, what, when, where, why, how. By extension, there's also kind of like clipped questions like top, fastest, cheapest, things like this. And you could kind of put it in like, what is the best? What is the top? Or who is the top? Things like that. So those are also similar like kind of queries and things like that that are representative of questions that want to be answered. See if I can zoom in here on this. Some kind of query data off some social landing pages. These are very like high intent kind of questions that people are answering on search engines, either through direct queries or by way of AI platforms making these queries kind of secondhand. So, who offers affordable IT support services with remote troubleshooting? I find fast and reliable IT support services for my team. Who offers leading cybersecurity services for mid-sized business? Things like this. And I just kind of wanted to illustrate that people are asking these high intent kind of commercial questions in addition to stuff that you might think of as more top of funnel, like how-tos or, what is this term or things like that. I'm gonna zoom back out here. Then next element is the kind of simplify section. So at this point, we've kind of established, we understand their pain. We've built a little rapport. We've educated them on our solution. That gets them into more of an information consuming mode. Rational thinking mode, and that's really like the antithesis of getting people to actually like take action and convert, and we want to generate leads. So simplify is usually more of like a kind of shock rock. We want to break people out of that information consuming state and kind of reactivate their lizard brains. And simplify kind of attempts to shock people out of that state and get them refocused on pain, get them more in acquisition mode, solution acquisition mode. So I have some kind of examples here of like highly visual, large blocks of kind of, copy that kind of get them out of like, not looking at walls of text anymore and more kind of like back refocused on their pain and finding solutions to it. So that's kind of the function of like the simplify. And then from there, we want to kind of reinforce with social proof once we've got them in that acquisition mode again with a Testify section. And, it's called Testify, but it's really more of a social proof of kind of content marketing. And, that could include testimonials, case studies, impacts made, logo clouds, things like that. So here we have an example of kind of like a Testify section where we've got some views here and a partner logo cloud for kind of social proof of credibility. We've kind of, got them in acquisition mode, added them some social proof. Now it's time to present them the, main offer of the page, which can be many different things. It can be lead magnet downloads, a call to action to read a post or consume a piece of content, a free consultation, claim a free IT audit, free dark web scan, something as simple as talk to sales, etc. And then here we just have kind of an example of a free network assessment offer. So just kind of circling back to the high level: pain, resonate, educate, simplify, testify, offer. I'll just pause and ask if anybody's got any quick questions there. Nope. Okay. I'm going to move on here to operationalizing the framework. So when you start a kind of marketing program, some of the core content types you're going to need at a fundamental level are landing pages, blog posts, social media posts, emails, and then lots and lots of supporting images for these content pieces. Using GPTs within a system helps kind of both the GPTs learn and helps you kind of keep them on track, and just helps get much higher quality marketing outputs. This is just trying to say, let's create a landing page with no like concrete direction, or let's create a blog post with no concrete direction on how to create it. Makes it much easier to manage and train those ICs, which again are, due to necessity, most likely going to be offshore contractors, which don't have a lot of background in IT. So helping them work within a system to create marketing content is definitely going to help increase the success rates and quality of their outputs. So kind of how to build strong GPTs. For a good thing to kind of know about GPTs is they retrieve knowledge in chunks and not as full documents. Generally between 300 and 800 word kind of chunks. That's what they're going to pull to like build knowledge and formulate their responses. Because of that, GPTs really thrive with structured knowledge documents. For instance, Markdown, JSON, XML, because you can almost think of like things in structure as like indexes that allow them to jump to the relevant pieces of knowledge that they can retrieve to build their answers. Versus if you have just like one, large wall of text, it's going to be more difficult for the GPT to retrieve knowledge and formulate good answers. I have kind of an example here of a structured Markdown document. We have a schema for our PRESTO kind of landing pages. It's a, pain heading and pain subheadline, and we've got kind of structured data with them, output, type, PRESTO section is part of the processing order in which the GPT should walk through and kind of build the data, output as text versus raw HTML, field generation instruction of those specific kind of fields with formatting notes and things like that. And those structured knowledge documents are a great way to increase the quality of outputs from GPTs and work with them. And within your kind of GPT instructions, I want to use Markdown for those. A lot of people tend to use just raw text, but use Markdown in your GPT instructions. I think Markdown is the best blend of human and machine readable format versus like JSON or XML, which are typically more of like machine data exchange formats. That's the kind of being echoed by the AI platforms themselves, which are kind of prompting people to create files known as like skill.mds. .md is a Markdown. The AI platforms themselves are pushing Markdown as well. And within your instructions, you do instruct the GPTs to actually read and consume these knowledge documents when formulating their answers. To kind of build strong GPTs, continued here. And you want to use Markdown for both backend instructions and knowledge documents with nested headings. You kind of want to compose those knowledge documents around those chunk/retrieval patterns of those 300 to 800 words chunks that it can retrieve, and try to put some structure around them with like nested headings. Mark down like a heading 1 is just 1 pound, a heading 2 would be 2 pounds, a heading 3 pounds, so on and so forth. You can provide structured inputs and structured outputs where possible. Those are both great for the GPT, and great for working with those individual contributors who will likely be using your GPTs to create marketing content. And when you build your GPTs, definitely try to provide supplementary knowledge documents. For instance, with a lot of our customers, we're starting to have an onboarding interview with them now. We take the SRT, which is just the transcript file from that interview, and put those into the GPTs, create kind of company knowledge base docs. It's going to be things like who's our target personas, what's our core messaging, what are our focus verticals, just anything like that you would want to kind of apply to all of your marketing content, or be represented, or at least have GPTs be aware of in all of your marketing content. And also highly recommend kind of providing examples of good outputs. This is something that kind of is really built over time. Usually you want to have 1 to 2 examples of good outputs that you've most likely manually created and think are a good content piece for that format, be it landing page, social media, blog post, etc. And then as you use your GPT to have it create more quality outputs, you can go back and update your knowledge documents with additional examples across different functional areas. So for instance, in an MSP context, we might have a good example of a server support landing page, good example of a network support landing page, good example of a cybersecurity support landing page, things like that. So it drawing from good examples with formatting, tone, structure, and things like that. And then we recommend using the latest thinking models like fast thinking, research, things like that. We recommend the thinking level, like ChatGPT, because those are going to be more likely to actually read knowledge documents. Whereas if you use the fast and kind of cheap models, outputs will be faster, but they'll be less likely to actually go back and read knowledge documents when generating their outputs. This is kind of a backend GPT configuration. So this is our kind of PRESTO landing page helper that we built. Let me see if I can get the zoom here. So you can see that we've got some Markdown format within the GPT instructions. If we click to expand this is probably 1,000 to 1,500 word set of instructions. And we've added these knowledge documents, such as a field examples Markdown file, PRESTO schema, which has our definitions of structured inputs and structured outputs, Markdown file. We've got a company overview knowledge document and key buyer personas knowledge document in this one. And then we are using the thinking version of the GPT-4 model. It was the latest model as of like last week. GPT-5 came out this week, so got to update some of our models there. How to use GPTs effectively. Actually go to use the GPTs. Friction should be relatively low. Behavior is kind of off and you're really having to struggle with it to produce quality outputs. That's a sign you need to either update instructions or knowledge-based documents. You'll understand though that GPTs are typically less accurate the first 1 to 2 times they are used, but in my experience, once you get to the 3rd or 4th time of using them, they're going to improve quickly based on feedback you provide them in the first couple times you use them. Just something to be aware of. So, might be something that kind of comes with experience, but you'll understand the difference between we need to instruct the instructions versus we just need to use this 1 or 2 more times to tune it properly. They will learn off of your interactions with them. That's great. Don't be afraid to tell the GPTs to remember to do X or always do X, because if you tell them specifically to remember something, they will, remember that and kind of commit that to their knowledge about working with you. Structured inputs are your friend. At a minimum, you want to supply a kind of primary pain point of the reader. We'll come over here to kind of our structured primary inputs. So for instance, on our landing page GPT, we supply a primary keyword, like an SEO focus keyword. We supply building the landing page for. We supply the primary pain point that the reader is experiencing and the primary outcome that they would like to achieve. Those are essentially 4 inputs that we'll collect at the beginning of a chat session with it. It will help shape its use in addition to all its backend knowledge documents that we have provided to it. As an example of kind of some primary inputs. I'm working with contractors here. My experience off of working with contractors on creating kind of marketing content. There's a little bit of a training wheels phase where you want to kind of get them to work on creating briefs and then getting an outline document, like kind of a skeleton document first, and then have them go to work on the full content output. And then once they go through this process a few times and kind of get trained on doing the Presto, system, you can move more towards high level delegation once trained and focus more on kind of the contextual supplementals like, here's some comparable content pieces, or here's some, include this information and when creating a landing page, or this information include creating a blog post, versus having to go through like a more robust process of create us a brief so we can get aligned on who the target persona is, what the goals are, target keywords, things like that, and start with an outline next, and then we'll actually try and create the content output. So that's how I kind of recommend progressing through things. You start working with contractors, again, in that kind of training wheels phase, and trained on the system, get them used to working with the GPT, and then you can kind of transition more towards the high level delegation after that. And then, eventually, once you kind of get your PTs tuned up, you've worked with them for a while, you know what to look out for in terms of QA within the system, you can kind of transition to agentic workflows. So you can use agent builders to build multiple GPTs that can talk to each other autonomously without human supervision, generate really good solid base outputs that then a human can kind of go and from there, versus trying to build those outputs kind of progressively. And make no mistake, like even with going to the agent phase, like you're talking about cutting content production times down from 8, 10, 12 hours content output to 1 to 2 hours. And if they're working manually with GPTs, and then if you kind of get this to more of the agentic workflow stage, a base content output can be done in as little as 5 minutes, and then you might need 20 minutes to tweak from there. So you can cut it down to a half hour. So obviously that's going to come with some kind of framework benefits. And a lot of companies right now are focused on, I'm really excited about having to have lower costs. And lower costs are great, but I really think that the real benefit, the ability to be more strategic and increase the quality of outputs. Somebody who's done marketing for 7 years now for an agency, pre and post AI, getting more contractors to write quality outputs without the assistance of English grammar and structure and things like that is a real nightmare. It's really helped increase the quality versus the speed. And don't get me wrong, the speed benefit is great, but the increase in quality is really the benefit in working with AI and Presto and these frameworks. That also makes it much easier to run things like split tests, which is something a lot of like MSPs never even really get around to doing because the budget would only kind of go so far. Budgets are to do more with less, which is great, which allows you to have more focus on things like branding, focus on things like live events, networking, and relationship building. And just an example of this is, kind of our original tortoise and hare mascots. This was what we had for kind of the middle 5 years of our journey. And then since AI has come, we've been able to focus more on branding, and these are like basically world-class illustrations now we've been able to make with AI. So it kind of just illustrates that increasing quality can be the benefit versus lowering costs. The framework has helped us generate, some recent wins, helped a channel vendor in the MSP space that was a SaaS vendor triple revenue in 14 months and sell their business to another company that going to keep working. They're just going to have a new CEO. And a lot of that they experienced was due to implementing Presto landing pages across their website, which helped them start booking like 10 demos a month. Also helped advertiser triple conversion rates on their landing page versus their baseline when running a split test on Google Ads. In history, their baseline landing page generated 6 leads over a 90-day time period, and our Presto version of the same page generated 18 leads. Also helped a new SEO client nearly double their SEO traffic in about a month, And this week they generated a lead from a 25 site, 30 employee property management firm from a SEO blog post published this month. And you can see that their traffic has taken a big jump and has gone from 58 clicks earlier this month to now 90 clicks in the last 7 days and nearly double search impressions. And some other kind of impacts we've made at a higher level. I've helped a North Florida MSP double revenue in less than 2 years, 10x their organic search traffic, climbed to number 2 in market visibility. We helped affiliate area MSP triple revenue in about 2 years. It was a smaller company when we started with them, and they have gone from about 300K when we started to 1.5 million and are still growing aggressively and have 40% search engine market share in a major Philly suburb. And this is a Vancouver, Canada MSP. We help triple their search impressions, generate a stable flow of 2 to 5 inbound leads per month via local SEO, and they have 200 first page keywords. Cybersecurity SaaS was the one I kind of spoke about that got acquired, and there are a couple other wins that I'll share this deck if you want after the webinar, and you can just do that if you want. And we also have some select case studies that you can view that kind of go into more details of some of the things that we have done. For that, I will say thank you for attending and open it up to any questions.